Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Andrew. We are the IB English guys. Folks, today we'd like to talk about the subject report for May 2024. There are some great tips and key pieces of information in there that students assessing in November 2024 next week, you need this info. Here we go.
That's right. This subject report pulled all of the examiners and they've collated all these comments. This is quite vital, and I think this will be helpful. So we're going to first talk about paper one. We're going to look at each criterion in detail and give you some tips that are important. What about criterion A?
Criterion A for paper one, Mr. Giles, that's your understanding and interpretation. And we know, especially from the examiner report, that textual references are essential. When you're making claims from your paper one text, whether it's a poem, whether it's an advertisement, you need to be pulling out real textual references, those quotes. That has to be the evidence that backs up your claims.
Yeah, this is a reading test and we need to be in that text. We also need to make sure that we're going beyond the literal. We're not just describing and summarizing, we are interpreting. It says interpretation for a reason. That means we have to discuss those deeper implications of the text. He likes sentence stems, and they're really helpful, such as readers can infer that, or the implications of this text are. Those are really helpful.
Yeah, really helpful, Mr. Jones. Now, criterion B for paper one, we're looking at analysis and evaluation. And we need to make sure when we use those textual references from criterion A that we are pinning those to precise authorial choices. And that means we need to label them, Mr. Giles.
Yeah, that's right. Now, as we're analyzing those authorial choices, we need to go beyond just a generic discussion of the effect. We're not talking about something that generates the reader's interest. We have to go deep with our analysis of the effect. We want to think about why. Why is this ineffective? Yeah, and ask ourselves some questions so that we can really expand that.
Yeah, none of this engages the reader's imagination. We don't want that, Mr. Giles. Now, criterion C, we're looking at focus and organization. And there was a comment that said we need to look out and beware of long introductory hooks for paper one. If you want to write a sentence, maybe two, probably one that sort of anchors you into the topic of the text, that's fine. But we need to avoid writing 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences that sort of deviate. Get right into that text. Get into that text.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. And the next thing we want to think about is focus. We want to focus on the guiding question. There's a literary aspect or a stylistic aspect they're asking us about. We've got to use that to focus our analysis. We also want to focus on an argument. So we're thinking about a good argument that we're going to develop throughout our analysis. The last thing we want to think about with organization are transitions. We need transitions so that our paper is cohesive, it sticks together. And we go from paragraph to paragraph, but even within the paragraph, we have those transitions.
That's right, Mr. Giles. Lastly, criterion D, of course, is language. And we want to just remember, and I think we know this, to avoid colloquial expressions and cliches. We're using our best complex academic vocabulary and sentence structure, and we're avoiding any casual phrasing.
We also want to think about the terminology we use, those literary devices or stylistic features we're talking about. We want to be precise with those because if we're incorrect and we use the wrong word, that's incorrect vocabulary, and that's going to affect criterion D.
That's right, the accuracy of those terms, criterion D. Mr. Giles, what do you say we move on to paper two?
That's good. Paper two is a comparative essay. It's a literary essay. It's the same for lit and langlit. We want to think, first of all, with criterion A. This is understanding and interpretation. It's worth 10 points.
Yeah, the first thing we want to think about is understanding and unpacking that chosen question. That means you're looking carefully at the question, you're identifying keywords, you're thinking about what those mean, and no pre-packaged essays, Mr. Giles. You can't just write out whatever you want. You've got to answer the question.
Yeah, that's right. And we like to anchor our response in specific moments in those texts so that we're showing that knowledge. We like the term literary hotspot. Those moments in the text that we studied and that really help us answer the question, this is important. And don't forget, we have to compare the big ideas between these two texts, discussing similarities and differences.
Yeah, that's right, Mr. Giles. Thinking about criterion B, we're getting into analysis and evaluation again. And something we see often as examiners, and the subject report also noted, is that we need to avoid just writing a plain thematic essay. Sure, you can write about various themes, but you can't just write about themes without talking about other authorial choices. We need other supporting authorial choices to describe and explain how those themes come out.
That's great. And as we identify those precise authorial choices, we have to remember we need to compare them and how they're used. So we want to think about, in what way do authors use similar features and similar choices, and what ways are they different? And so let's talk about craft and compare that as well.
Criterion C looks at focus and organization. And the examiner report noted that students had trouble writing the introduction for paper two, Mr. Giles. We want to think about really how can we organize this? So think about the question that you've chosen, think about any keywords you need to define, and think about how to anchor and ground the reader into that topic. You need to work towards a comparative argumentative thesis, Mr. Giles. That should be at the end of your introduction.
And don't forget, we want to make an outline as we're looking, as we're planning, so that our outline helps us with our comparative points, so that each paragraph, each subsequent paragraph has a comparative point that we're bringing up that's developing the argument. That's hard. The last thing we want to think about with organization is that if we're writing on shorter text, if we're doing poetry, or short stories, we have to make sure we're covering several poems in our response or several short stories. We're not just focusing on one, because short texts need friends.
That's right, Mr. Giles. Now, lastly, for paper 2, criterion D again is language. This may seem obvious, but we need to think about using varied and complex language. This is an academic paper. You're writing for IB English, right? So you want to use your best academic vocabulary, a range of sentence starters, a range of simple and complex sentences, really showcase your best verbiage.
We also want those rich comparative sentences. We need to really weave in many comparative sentences in our writing. So as we're doing that, we want to think about those sentence frames to help us compare and look at similarities and differences.
That's right, folks. So in the end, we wish you the best of luck on your November 2024 exam, whether you're taking literature or language and literature. We hope that these tips from the examiner report, the subject report, take you to the end, okay? Good luck. Thanks for staying with us, and best of luck.
Good luck, guys.